Hi, my name is Oliver Lueiza, Creative Director and Maxon Master Trainer, and today we're going to talk about the NFTree design that I made for the last 3D motion show. Especially, we're going to learn how to build this voxel grid and how to create the wireframe structure which is connecting and surrounding the whole voxel grid. For that purpose, we're going to use Cinema 4D S24, Xparticles, and Redshift. So let's get started. Here we are on Cinema 4D S24, and what you are looking at is the model of our voxel. And as you can see, it's just a cube with some holes, and on the center of it we have a simple sphere. If you want to use this model, it's going to be able in the link on the description. I'm going to turn off my ground shading lines. I just want to use the ground shading on display. And also I'm going to turn off the subdivision surface in order to get a better performance on the viewport. Cool. So we are going to create a cloner object in order to get our grid voxel effect. So I'm going to make this individual node a child of this cloner. The cloner is already on the mode grid array because this is the default. I'm going to rename this cloner boxes, and I'm going to change my instance mode from instance to render instance, and that is because we are going to increase this count number a lot. So if you don't want to make your computer freeze, it's better to change from instance mode to render instance. So as we have a cube of 70 centimeters on each axis, we are going to make the size of the grid 75 for 75 and 75 on each axis, and that is because we want a little gap between the voxels, okay, in order to see some of the connection that we are going to make later. So we are going to increase the number of clones. I'm going to put 24 on X, 30 on Y, and 24 on Z. Now the camera is inside the grid, so I'm going to zoom back and that is our grid. We are going to duplicate this object with Ctrl key pressed. I'm going to drag these cloner boxes underneath. I'm going to get rid of the individual node, the boxes, and I'm going to put the sphere core inside the new cloner object. And obviously I'm going to rename these cloner boxes cloner spheres. So now we have the spheres inside of our cubes. Great. Now we need to mask this voxel grid with a shape of a foliage, and for that purpose we are going to use an actual 3D model of a tree. So we're going to use the asset manager for that, and I'm going to show this in a new file because it's gonna be so much clearer. You have to press this button. This is the button that allows you to navigate on the asset manager, and if you type on this search bar the word tree, you are going to have a lot of objects and material and texture that have that word on it, right? So in this case we need just a tree. You can zoom in or zoom out on this slide bar, so we're going to zoom in a little bit in order to get a better view of them, and we're going to use this tree. I'm happy with this. Double click on that. I'm going to close my asset manager, and we have this model. Okay, I'm going to copy this tree and I'm going to paste that on my voxel grid file. Paste. And right now you can see just the tip of the tree. And that's because the tree is inside of the grid. And in order to get a better view of the tree, I'm going to turn off the cloner sphere, and on the cloner boxes I'm going to turn on the visibility of the subdivision surface cube. So now we are just seeing the individual node. Okay, that is a null object, and that's why we have this little dot. So this is perfect to see where is our tree model. If you press this little window here, you are going to go to the 4-panel view. And if you press this little window on any of this view, you are going to go on that view specifically. Okay, you can also do the same thing with the middle button of your mouse. So in this case, on the rest of the tutorial, I'm going to use that way, right? Now I'm going to put this tree here. The idea is to use and optimize the space with that tree. I'm going to scale the tree a little bit, like so, in order to have the whole tree inside the grid. Okay, so now we are on a good place with our tree. And then I just want to use the leaves because I'm going to make just the foliage on this tutorial. So I'm going to take out the leaves from the tree object. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of everything. I just want to have the mesh, the geometry, and also I'm going to get rid of this material. So I'm going to turn off the visibility on viewport, the cloner boxes, and now if you can see closer on this mesh, you're going to notice that we have a bunch of planes, and that is because every plane is a leaf, and we need close mesh in order to this effect works better. So for that purpose, I'm going to use a volume builder object. I'm going to put the leaves inside the volume builder. If you want to know specifically how this object works, on Cineversity you have a real interesting series of tutorials talking about just the volume builder and volume workflow in general, and you can learn almost everything from this object. So I'm going to say that we are going to use the volume object in the sign distance field type, and in this case we have our leaves as a child of the volume builder. And right now the volume builder is creating the voxelization from the faces, from the surface of our leaves. And if I create a volume measure, which is going to make a mesh from the volume builder calculation, you are going to have this result. And in this case is not so much useful. So we are going to change the calculation on this, and we are going to use the points of this mesh. Okay, the points of the mesh on the leaves, not the surface of the polygons. So I'm going to turn off this, and the result is pretty different. And we're going to put a radius around 40, and we're going to have this mesh. Okay, so that is perfect because we can use this close mesh in order to mask our cloner boxes. So I'm going to turn on my cloner boxes. I'm going to turn on my cloner spheres on the viewport. I'm going to turn on also the subdivision surface inside the cloner in order to get the full view. Okay, you have to remember that right now our volume measure object is inside of the grid, and we are going to create a volume effector. Okay, so we have to be sure that the volume effector is applied on the cloners, like so. And the volume effector allows you to mask mograph object with the volume of a mesh object. So in this case, we are going to use this volume measure to mask these cloners. So we need to go to our volume. On effector tab, we have a field called volume object, and we're going to fit this field with the volume measure. And nothing is happening because right now we are controlling the scale of the cloners with the volume, but we don't want that. So we are going to turn off this parameter, and we are going to turn off the visibility because, sorry, I accidentally pressed my middle mouse button. We are going to use the visibility, not the scale. So I'm going to turn on the visibility tab, and voila, we have our voxel grid of boxes being masked by this volume measure. And if you move this volume, and I'm going to turn off the visibility on the viewport, you can see how the object is changed. Cool. So we have the first part of our foliage, voxel foliage kind of, already done. So now we need to make the wireframe structure that is connecting every voxel with each other and also surrounding the whole foliage shape. For that purpose, we're going to use xparticle in a combination with the mograph object. The first thing that we need to do is duplicate these cloner boxes. We're going to get rid of this individual node inside, and I'm going to turn off my other cloners on the viewport, turn the visibility off, and I'm going to rename this as cloner planes. Right now we don't have anything inside. We're going to create a plane primitive, and in this case is too big, so we are going to shrink this size to 25 and 25, and we just need one polygon on this plane, so we're going to decrease this width segment and height segment to 1. So right now we have a plane with just one polygon. We're going to put this plane inside of the cloner planes, and we have this result, right? And it's quite the same result as we saw before with the other clones. Now we need to emit some particles from each polygon center, and to do that you have to do some things before. One of the things that you have to do is change the instance mode from render instance to instance, and that is because we need real geometry to make this effect. And another thing that you have to do is to make a connect object. I'm going to rename this connect object as connect particle source particle source, right? And we're going to put these cloner planes inside the connect object, and that is because the connect object makes a single mesh. The connect object connects everything that is inside of it. So right now we have a single mesh from our cloner planes. Okay, so and we need that in order to the xparticle emitter works. So now we are going to go to my Xparticles menu and we are going to create an XP system. The XP system gives you already a XP emitter, and this is for default. So I'm going to go to my XP emitter and I'm going to change the emitter shape from rectangle. If you press play right now, you are going to have a lot of particles from this rectangle, but we want to emit the particles from the polygons. Okay, so we're going to change this from rectangle to object. We're going to feed this object field with our connect particle source, like so, and emit from, we already have the polygon center, that is okay, and we need to stick particle to source object in order to get every particle on the polygon center, and we don't want to the particle moves, right? So we're going to stick the particle to source object, and we want also one particle per source element. So in every polygon center we are going to have a particle, right? In emission, we just need just one shot of particles. We don't need a rate or something like that. We're going to turn off the speed to 0 just to be sure that the particle is not gonna move. And the radius, we're going to put 5 in order to see them better. On the display tab, we are going to change the particle display from editor display, from squares to circles, right? And one important thing right now is turn on this display constraint, because we are going to use this visualization later. So I'm going to turn on right now. Okay, so if I press play just one frame forward, we have one particle getting born from my polygons, right? So if I turn off the visibility on the viewport of the planes, we have just the particle. Okay, right? So now we need to connect every particle with each other in a perpendicular way, and that is going to be our wireframe structure. For that purpose, I'm going to use a dynamic object, and the dynamic menu, I'm going to choose the constraint. I'm not going to go to the full explanation of what is a constraint, because the constraints usually is used on the dynamic calculation field, okay? But in this case, we just want the visualization of that connections. So we are going to turn on the connect at birth first, and we need to change some things, because if I rewind and I move forward just one frame, nothing happens. And that is because, if you remember, we have a separation or size on our cloner voxel grid of 75 on each axis, and this radius is not enough to cover that space, because from this particle to these particles we have 75 centimeters, so this radius is not enough. A good amount is 100. Okay, and we are going to turn down this connection limit, because we don't want diagonal lines, we just want perpendicular lines. Okay, and I'm going to show you this right now. Rewind, move forward just one frame, and we have this beautiful square structure, right, or cubic structure. If you put more connection or more radius on this, for example 200, we're going to have this result, right, with some diagonal lines, because you are increasing the connection between the particles and you are increasing the radius. And this is pretty cool, but it's not what we want right now. So we're going to get back to 100 and just 4 connection limits. Rewind, move forward just one frame, perfect. Okay, so now this is just a visualization of the constraint. We don't have a real object to render right now. In order to fix that, we're going to use a generator called XP Trail, right? You go to generators, choose the XP Trail, right? And this works like a tracer object in Cinema 4D. But the difference between tracer and this XP Trail is that this XP Trail has a lot of algorithm. So I'm going to feed this XP Trail with our XP emitter, and I'm going to change the algorithm from no connection to constraint. And it's super important to turn on the case of birth. Okay, so now, as you can see, we have a real spline object from the constraint. If I turn off the visibility of the constraint, we are going to see, I'm going to turn off the visibility on XP emitter also, and we have just the spline. So you can use this with a sweep nerve object, for example, or with a Redshift tag, which is the method that we are going to use later. So if I turn on the rest of the cloners, we are going to have a problem, because now the structure is inside the main shape. I mean, you have the connection between every voxel, but everything is inside, and we need to expand that information in order to have the wireframe structure outside also the main shape. And for that, we're going to duplicate the same setup that we used before. So I'm going to duplicate this volume. I'm going to duplicate this volume measure also, right? So now I'm going to turn on my volume measure. I'm going to turn on my particle source again, and on the volume measure, I'm going to rename this volume measure as volume measure bigger. I'm going to rename the volume object, the volume effector, also bigger, and I'm going to use that effector on these cloner planes. I'm going to get rid of the original volume object, and I'm going to use this volume bigger, right? But on the volume bigger, also I need to change the source. In this case is volume measure, and we have to use the volume measure bigger, right? So inside the volume measure bigger, we need to change some things, and we're going to go to the volume builder. We're going to choose the ellipse, and we're going to increase this mesh point radius from 40 to like 115. If I hide my volume measure bigger, we are going to see the planes outside the main shape, right? Because we are masking the planes, the cloner object of the planes, with a bigger shape. And if I rewind and press just one frame forward, we're going to have this beautiful structure, because the particles are getting born from the new mesh, right? So I'm going to turn off my connect particles, and now we have this beautiful voxel grid with the outside mesh, outside wireframe structure. Now we need to see how to render these lines, right? And for that purpose, I'm going to turn on my Redshift render view, press play, right? And now nothing is happened, because we just have a spline object on the XP system, which is the XP trail. And in order to get some geometry of the spline object, we need to add a Redshift object tag. And this tag is super smart, because allows you to change some visibility setups, geometry setups, etc., etc. And when you apply a Redshift object tag, the tag already know what kind of object is the original object, source object, I mean. So in this case, the tag recognizes the spline object. Okay, so the tag already offer you a bunch of ways to match this this spline. And in this case, we're going to use capsules because we want the rounded ending on every tip, right? And in this case, we can already see something, but maybe it's too thin. So we're going to increase the thickness from 1 to 5, right? And if we look closer, we're going to see actual geometry from the spline object, in this case the XP trail, right? And in this case, the Redshift object tag is so smart that even the color is transferred from the XP trail. But if you want to make a material, you can do that. For example, if I create a Redshift material, and in this case I'm going to go to my shader graph, and I'm going to change the material node from preset to, I don't know, Cooper, for example, preset. And then I apply this material to our XP trail. I'm going to close the shader graph. You're going to have that material applied, and in this case you are not going to see so much. So I'm going to create a dome light just in order to see something. Dome light, right? And I'm going to fit this dome light with some HDRI image, and I'm going to go to my asset manager again, and in this case I'm going to tip HDR, and you are going to have a lot of materials, right? So you have to be careful because these are standard Cinema 4D materials, and we need the texture of that, not the material itself. So in this case here we have the textures, right? Those are material and these are texture. So we're going to choose whatever we want. Some, for example, this one. I'm going to move this directly from our asset manager, right? I'm going to choose no in this case. I'm going to close the asset manager, and now also in the dome light I'm going to turn off the visualization of the background. So on environment I'm going to turn off the enable background, and now we have some lighting over our scene, right? Okay, so now we just have to make the random colorization on our boxes. So for that we're going to use a plane effector, right? I'm going to minimize this window for a moment. We're going to use a plane effector, but just on the boxes, and that's why we have two cloner objects separate, because we're going to make the colorization just on the boxes. So I'm going to put this plane effector on the effector tab after the volume, right? And right now the plane effector is affecting the position of the cloners, and we don't want that, right? We just want to affect the color mode, and in this case we already have the fields color activated, right? Before to move on, I'm going to turn off my materials, and if you add on the file of tab a field, in this case a random field, I'm going to press this, I'm going to choose a random field, and we are going to turn off the parameter tag here, and we are going to turn on the colorize, and we already see something, right? But in order to get a proper feedback on the viewport, we need to change the instance mode from render instance to instance. And now we have a randomization on the color of the clones, right? So now we are going to go to effectors. Sorry, we're going to go to the plane effector, right? On the random field and in the color remap, because if you can see, we are using right now a random field type with a noise type, and you can change the seed, for example, whatever you want. And we're going to go to the color remap. And in this color remap mode, we're going to choose the gradient. And in this gradient, we are going to change the gradient, or a gradient with more colors, right? And in this case, we are just going to use the presets, for example, this one, Shim 8, and right now we are seeing the results, right? And you can change the position of these nodes, because if, for example, if you want more of this color, you can make it bigger on the gradient, so you are going to have more of this color on the clones, right? You can change the colorization of this, the saturation, everything. We're going to change everything to something more green, right? Even the last one, like so, right? And if you press the right click on the gradient, you can distribute the nodes again, so everything is in order right now. And that is how you can control the colors on a mograph object, in this case a cloned object, right? But right now, if we open the Redshift render view, we are not going to have the same colorization on our render, right? And that is because right now we are not connecting the effector, the plane effector with the random field with the material of the clones. So now we are going to go to the cloner boxes. I'm going to put this material on the cloner object, and we are going to connect this information on the viewport with the information on the render view. For that purpose, we are going to use on the shader graph a node called color user data. Color user data, right? Like so. And this node allows you to read information, data information from different objects. In this case, we're going to use mograph information, the color of the mograph information, right? And this is going to read the plane effector information, because you have the material applied to the cloner. So this is going to be automatically read by the Redshift material. So I'm going to connect this color user data to the basic property diffuse color, right? And if I press play on the Redshift render view, we are going to have the correct result. And voila. Now we have the information of the mograph effector, the plane effector, on the render view in Redshift. That is super useful. So this concludes our tutorial. Hope you like it, and see you on the next tutorial.